Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're taking a massive step back. If you've studied basic economics before, you've probably spent a ton of time analyzing individual trees, right? Consumers, businesses, single markets. But to understand the true health of a country, we have to zoom out and look at the entire forest. Today, we're exploring the big picture of the economy, macroeconomics. And as you'll see, understanding this big picture fundamentally changes how we view the world, from the price of your groceries to your actual chances of landing that next job.
So, Adam Smith, the famous founding father of modern economics, gave us this beautiful idea of the invisible hand. He suggested that if buyers and sellers just follow their own self-interest, well, everything magically balances out. We don't even need to worry about the wealth of the country as a whole. But here's the million-dollar question. What happens when that invisible hand drops the ball? What happens when millions of individuals doing exactly what's best for themselves accidentally creates an absolute economic disaster?
Okay, let's map out our journey today in 5 quick steps. First, micro versus macro. Second, the Great Depression. Third, the birth of macroeconomics. Fourth, the capitalist economy. And finally, the 4 sectors of the economy. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. Micro versus macro. Because to really appreciate the macro, we first have to respect the micro. Think of microeconomics as the study of individual economic agents. That's you, me, or a single company just trying to maximize personal profit or welfare. It's all about supply and demand for one specific thing, like, say, shoes or apples. Macroeconomics, on the flip side, deals with the economy in its absolute entirety. Instead of looking at the price of an apple, macro looks at the general price levels of all goods combined. Instead of checking if a local factory is hiring, macro asks about the overall employment levels of the entire nation. It basically groups things together into aggregates to spot these massive trends that individuals simply cannot control.
So why did economists eventually realize this micro view just wasn't enough? Well, because reality is messy. Sometimes markets exist but completely fail to find that perfect balance of equilibrium. Or sometimes markets can't even exist for things we desperately need. Plus, as a society, we have unselfish goals that go way beyond individual profit. Things like national defense, public education, and health. I mean, you can't exactly crowdsource an army or rely on individual profit margins to build public schools, right? To manage all this, the state has to step in with sweeping policies affecting taxation, interest rates, and the money supply. You literally cannot achieve massive societal goals just by hoping individuals act in their own best interest.
That realization was brutally forced upon the world by a catastrophic historical event. This brings us to Section 2, the Great Depression.
Just wrap your head around the sheer terrifying scale of this number, 25%. In the United States, between 1929 and 1933, the unemployment rate shot up to a staggering 25%. To put that into perspective for you, in 1929, it was just 3%. Literally 1 in 4 people who wanted to work simply couldn't find a job.
And the reality of welfare relief lines perfectly illustrates the human devastation behind that terrifying statistic. These lines were full of people waiting for basic sustenance, all because the demand for goods had practically evaporated. The factories themselves were physically fine, but they sat empty and idle because nobody had the money to buy what they were making. This wasn't just a quick dip. This was devastating, long-lasting unemployment.
Alongside that massive unemployment, the total amount of stuff the country made, its aggregate output, plummeted by about 33% over those same 4 years. Think about that. A full third of the American economy just vanished. The old microeconomic theories basically said, hey, just wait, prices will adjust and the market will clear. But the market wasn't clearing. The old lens was completely broken. Economists desperately needed a new way to explain how an entire economy could just stay trapped in this massive downward spiral.
And this total systemic failure paved the way for Section 3, the birth of macroeconomics, a completely new discipline emerging right out of the ashes of the Depression.
So what exactly did this new field look like? Well, instead of assuming the whole is just the sum of its parts, macroeconomics was defined as the study of the working of the economy in its entirety. It forces us to examine the deep interdependence of different sectors. The absolute game changer here is the realization that you cannot isolate problems anymore. You have to address situations facing the whole society simultaneously.
The intellectual giant who really drove this shift was a British economist named John Maynard Keynes. In 1936, directly inspired by the failures of the Great Depression, he published The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. Keynes completely changed the game. Instead of looking at individual markets, his approach was to examine the whole interconnected system at once. He theorized that an economy could actually get stuck in a state of high unemployment for a long time, and that just waiting around for the invisible hand definitely wasn't going to fix it.
Let's move to Section 4, the capitalist economy. To really grasp Keynes's interconnected whole, we need to understand the parts of the engine.
In a capitalist economy, production relies on 4 fundamental building blocks. We call these the factors of production, and each factor earns a very specific type of reward in the market. If you provide capital, you earn interest. If you provide natural resources or land, you earn rent. If you provide your human effort, your labor, you earn wages. And finally, if you provide entrepreneurship, you earn profit. Basically, all the revenue generated in an economy gets sliced up into these 4 specific categories.
Now, the entrepreneur is really the spark plug of this whole capitalist engine. They're the ones exercising control over major decisions and taking on the primary risks of starting a business. They pay the rent, they pay the interest on the capital, and they pay wages to their workers. Whatever's left over at the end of the day, if anything is even left over, is their profit. But here's the real macroeconomic magic. What do they do with that profit? Well, they often reinvest it to buy new machinery or build new factories. This is called investment expenditure, and it's absolutely crucial because it physically expands the economy's overall capacity to produce. Now that we have the engine parts, let's jump to Section 5, 4 sectors of the economy, where we divide everything into massive, distinct regions. What's really fascinating here is how elegantly we can simplify the absolute chaos of the real world. Every single transaction, every job, every purchase can essentially be mapped into one of 4 major sectors: firms, the government, households, and the external sector. These are the 4 puzzle pieces that make up the complete picture of a modern macroeconomy.
Let's quickly map out how they all connect. First up, firms. These are the capitalist enterprises actually producing the goods and services. Second, the government. This is the state. It frames the laws, collects taxes, and builds public infrastructure, like schools and roads. Third, we have households. That's us. We supply the labor to the firms and government, we consume the goods the firms produce, we pay taxes, and we save. And finally, the external sector. Because hey, no economy is an island. This sector represents the entire rest of the world, interacting with our domestic economy through buying our exports, selling us imports, and moving foreign capital across borders. All 4 of these are locked in a continuous, endless loop of interaction.
And that brings us to the ultimate macroeconomic reality check. Because these 4 sectors are so deeply intertwined, a shock to one sends massive ripples through them all. Remember the Great Depression? The invisible hand isn't going to catch everything. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. If households suddenly stop spending, or if the external sector completely froze up tomorrow, how exactly would the other 3 react to absorb the blow? Keep that interconnected force in your mind, because that is the true heart of macroeconomics. Thanks for exploring the big picture with me today.